Hello and welcome to French Philosophers React, a philosophical take on the news headlines for today, September 7th, 2024. This is an AI-generated podcast and can make mistakes. Use it for generating possible ideas, but don't rely on it as an authoritative guide to the news or to the details of French philosophy. In the news today, story: UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer vows to crack down on people smuggling gangs, using tactics similar to those used to apprehend rioters earlier this year. After a meeting with law enforcement agencies and cabinet ministers, Starmer pledged to retake control of our borders and take these gangs down. The summit comes after the deaths of at least 12 people attempting to cross the Channel. Starmer dismissed reports that Germany plans to adopt the UK's Rwanda deportation plan, calling it an expensive gimmick. He also rejected suggestions to open more safe routes for asylum seekers. So what might French philosophers have to say about this news item? The story of Keir Starmer's vow to crack down on people smuggling gangs offers a fascinating case study in the politics of control and the management of human flows. On its surface, the Prime Minister's pledge appears to be a straightforward commitment to enforcing national borders and protecting vulnerable individuals from exploitation. However, upon closer examination, it reveals itself to be a complex web of ideological contradictions and performative gestures that belie a deeper logic of state power. In his book, The Idea of Communism, Alain Badiou argues that the modern nation-state is founded on a fundamental paradox. Its claim to represent the universal values of freedom and equality is inherently at odds with its need to maintain control over its territory and population. This tension gives rise to what Badiou terms the ideological dispositive, a complex system of representations, institutions, and practices that serve to legitimize the state's authority while masking its underlying contradictions. In the context of the story, Starmer's vow to retake control of our borders can be seen as a classic example of this ideological dispositive in action. By framing his policy initiative as a necessary response to the threat posed by people smuggling gangs, the Prime Minister is able to tap into a deep-seated public anxiety about national security and sovereignty. This allows him to reassert the state's authority over its territory while simultaneously reinforcing the notion that certain individuals, namely those attempting to cross the Channel without authorization, are inherently threatening to this order. However, as Badiou notes in The Century, this kind of performative gesture is ultimately self-contradictory. By invoking the specter of national security, Starmer's policy initiative effectively legitimates the very same logic of control and exclusion that it claims to be opposing. This is because the state's assertion of authority over its territory necessarily implies a distinction between those who are deemed legitimate members of the national community and those who are not, a distinction that is always already racialized, classed, and gendered. Moreover, as Badiou argues in The Rebirth of History, this kind of ideological maneuvering serves to obscure the underlying material conditions that give rise to human migration in the first place. By framing people smuggling gangs as the primary cause of the problem, Starmer's policy initiative effectively deflects attention away from the structural factors, such as poverty, war, and environmental degradation, that drive individuals to seek asylum or economic opportunities elsewhere. Furthermore, Starmer's dismissal of reports that Germany plans to adopt the UK's Rwanda deportation plan as an expensive gimmick can be seen as a telling example of this kind of ideological obfuscation. By framing the policy as a mere gimmick, the Prime Minister is able to downplay its significance while simultaneously reinforcing the notion that certain solutions, namely those that involve the mass deportation of asylum seekers to distant and often hostile territories, are inherently impractical or unworkable. In reality, however, this kind of policy initiative represents a cynical attempt to externalize the costs of migration control onto other states and societies. As Badiou notes in The Meaning of Sarkozy, this kind of neoliberal logic is founded on a fundamental denial of the universal principles of human rights and dignity, principles that are always already compromised by the state's need to maintain control over its territory and population. Finally, Starmer's rejection of suggestions to open more safe routes for asylum seekers can be seen as a classic example of what Badiou terms the reactive logic of state power. By framing this option as impractical or unworkable, the Prime Minister is able to reassert the state's authority over its territory, while simultaneously reinforcing the notion that certain individuals, namely those seeking asylum or economic opportunities, are inherently threatening to this order. In conclusion, the story of Keir Starmer's vow to crack down on people smuggling gangs offers a fascinating case study in the politics of control and the management of human flows. Through the lens of Alain Badiou's work, we can see that this policy initiative represents a complex web of ideological contradictions and performative gestures that belie a deeper logic of state power. By examining the ways in which Starmer's policy initiative reinforces the nation-state's authority over its territory, while simultaneously obscuring the underlying material conditions that give rise to human migration, we can gain a deeper understanding of the structural factors that shape our world and the ways in which they might be transformed through collective action and struggle. Thank you for listening to today's episode of French Philosophers React. Be sure to come back tomorrow for more reflective takes on the day's news.